Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Aporonia ngā mahanga, te rua hui hui arahanga tōku ingoa. Heuri tēnei no ngai wihi maha o te motu, heoi, heuri tēnei o Ngaitahu, o Te Arawa, Taranaki, Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Hine, Kamutu Kamutu, Kāti katuku mihi ki te kaupapa o te pōnei, tēnā koutou. Kia ora everybody, my name is Aporonia. Tākuru, ngā mahanga te rua hui hui arahanga. And yes, I'll say my whole name because if my grandmother was here tonight, she would ring my ears for not. And I'm just really excited to be part of this kaupapa tonight and really excited to get to talk about what we do. So, kia ora.
I ngā mana i ngā reo i ngā iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Auraki te maunga, ko Waimakariri te awa, ko Nathan toku papa, ko Waihopai te whenua, ko Justine toku whaia, ko Ōtautahi te whenua, no kai poe ahau. Ko kai whakamana te voice whakarongo mai, toku mahi, ko Tayla Reece toku ingoa no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Tayla Reece. I was part of the co-design of Puawai alongside Nia. And I'm on the facilitation team, and I'm also a tuakana for the disability rōpū. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as part of the rainbow community, which is something that I'll talk a little bit more as part of my upstand a bit. I'm a youth worker and enjoy working in youth development spaces like Puawai, and my 9-to-5 role is as kai whakamana at Voice Whakarongo Mai, and that's the independent advocacy agency or union for children and young people in care. And so we're feeling really privileged to be invited up here today to talk about the importance in Christchurch to be upstanders around inclusivity and diversity through that work that we have done with Puawai. Throughout planning for this talk, there were times that Nia and I often looked at each other and wondered how we ended up here and whether we're really the best people or how qualified we are to speak on the things that we're going to touch on. But I think those feelings and thoughts of fear and doubt actually probably help give fuel to what our takeaways and learnings have been from this program. And so to reach our bits about the importance of inclusivity and diversity and our takeaways from the program, we thought it would be good to run through what the Puawai Youth Program actually is, what we've been doing over the past 9 months, followed by some reflections and takeaways and ending with our own experiences being a part of Puawai, or kind of how we've reflected on our experiences through Puawai. So Puawai itself started as a 9-month youth leadership program, but because of COVID, it's probably about a year. And the tagline is Poipoia te kākano kia Puawai, which means nurture the seed and it will blossom. So it's a bicultural program, which is all about discovering our strengths and exploring diversity. We started with about 40 young people, split into 40 young people split into 8 rōpū. We had a couple of rōpū Māori, some Pasifika rōpū, a rainbow rōpū, a Muslim rōpū, and a disability rōpū. And as you can imagine, that's a real melting pot of different cultures and experiences. And the real focus was on connecting our rangatahi around the region to be able to contribute to their communities. And developing real skills and knowledge and networks through participating in this bicultural program with the focus on inclusion and diversity.
Awesome. So we started off in November last year, and it seems like such a long time ago now. So at our first hui, we basically introduced the idea of Puawai to the group of 40 rangatahi that were gathered and basically selected by our youth leaders, or tuakana as we call them, and essentially let them know what we were wanting to get out of Puawai. We also did some whakawhanaungatanga so that they knew who we were and we knew who they were. We also introduced the idea of strength finders so that they could understand that they also have skills and qualities within them that they can put into action in the coming months that we were going to spend together. And so our second hui was based on Te Ao Māori, so we came up with the concept of a window into my world, or into our world. So our second hui was a window into Te Ao Māori. So as a staff member at Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, I was really privileged to have these young people come along to our office and basically have an experience into what it is like for a young Māori person in Christchurch. and we did some whakawhanangatanga. We learnt some waiata. I had my father come along and teach some maurako, which was really fun. And we also touched on activators.
Cool. We had our third hui planned for the week before lockdown, but the announcement was made that we couldn't hold events for over a certain number of people, so that was the first of many virtual hui, in which that first one, our hui 3, really was just a check-in and a bit of a debrief after our last hui. Hui 4 was an opportunity to bring everyone back together. We did a portion on Strengths Finder, and Daisy, Lavia Timo, she led a spoken word activity where rangatahi got to write their own poems about home and where home is for them, which greatly linked to our overarching theme of identity. And our last virtual hui, Hui 5, was one of my favourite hui topics, and I'm absolutely gutted that we didn't get to do it in person. Rose, the tuakana of the Rainbow Rōpū, and myself did a hui on Window to Our World Rainbow 101. Rainbow 101, and how to be an ally. And we continued this theme, we continued this theme that each hui flavour would reflect a different rōpū that's a part of our program, and explored different terms, intersectionality, pronouns, etc. as part of that hui, which was really awesome.
And then we had the Mana Moana Hui, which was led by our Pacifica team. So that was Daisy, Lavia Timo, Seta, Uli, and their group of rangatahi. So they basically took us through the Avonside Girls and Shirley Boys High School campus, which we thought was really important because we know that that area, the demographic there is a lot of Pacifica students, which is a really cool insight for us to see what their school life is like. They also laid out some really, really delicious Pacifica kai, and if you've had it, you know how good that is. We learned some awesome sasa, which is a lot of fun. You can see me down here, very bald, looking really pretty silly if you ask me. And we learned some waiata, so that was also really fun.
A huge portion of the Puawai program, so we have our hui that happen once a month, and there's the rōpū that sort of connect with each other between each hui, but a huge part of the program was the activators, and these were originally called April activators because they were going to be in the April school holidays, but as you can imagine that didn't happen, so we just called them activators and we did them in the July school holidays. And an activator is an event, idea, initiative, project that the young people as part of the program come up with that sort of reflects the kaupapa of the Puawai program. And we did a bit of brainstorming at each hui, and then we slowly did a bit more planning. And the ideas that they came up with were interactive identity mural that young people could contribute to, and an inspiring speakers event, and we've got some photos of those coming up. But I think what I want to touch on is we had in our mind what we wanted to achieve through the hui, but I think working collaboratively, the rōpū working collaboratively together on the Puawai activators is where the real magic happened. It's these planning meetings in between the formal hui, which I think is where the magic happened, where they connected. There was one young person that said, I think I'm in the wrong rōpū. I'm in the Pacifica rōpū, but I'm Māori. And one of our young people in the Rainbow group said, I don't think we're really in rōpū anymore. I think we're just one big rōpū. And that was really cool because I think that really showed the really connectedness that they'd formed, even virtually, which is how we'd done most of our connection at that point. The theme that the young people came up with for our activators was celebrating us. They wanted it to be about celebrating identity. They didn't want it to be about overcoming something despite something. So overcoming, going to the Olympics despite having a disability, or achieving this despite being queer. They just wanted it to be like, let's just celebrate us for being us, despite nothing. And so here's some photos from our identity mural. It was an interactive art exhibition set up in here actually, and it was the complete original idea of the young people in the program. The idea is that young people came in and grabbed a disc and they created on it what identity meant to them. And so we had different mediums. We had like magazines, paper mache, painting, all sorts of stuff. I've like gone blank now what we had. Polaroids, and we hung them up, and yeah, that's just a picture of what some of them looked like. And it ran all day from like 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. and it was just a really awesome day, and it almost felt like the physical representation of everything we had achieved over the past 7 months. And Neil will talk a bit about the other activator.
And as Taylor mentioned, the other idea that our rangatahi came up with was an inspiring speakers event. So this was led by one of our rangatahi in our disability group, which is really exciting because he felt that he wasn't really confident as a public speaker, yet he was the one who was leading the speakers event, which we thought was kind of the outcome that we were wanting to get from our program. Essentially, it's a leadership program, so that came to fruition for us. So basically, the event strongly represented celebrating us, as Taylor mentioned, and we had representation from all of the rōpū that we look after in our program, from our disability group, rainbow group, young Muslim, Pacifica and Māori groups. And they basically spoke on their experiences as minorities and as young people in Christchurch and the misconceptions that they face.
And so a bit about the main part of our talk tonight is Neil and I want to talk about some reflections and ideas and some key takeaways that we've taken from Puawai. And I think intersectionality is a huge theme that's come up throughout this hui, particularly the segments where we talked about identity and window to our worlds. Although young people are in these rōpū, they're more than just that. It's that idea that we're made up of many identities, but we're not defined by our identity, if that makes sense. And I think to be an upstander is about reflecting on where you sit in these different spheres and how they contribute to your identity and how that shows up in your world. But it's to take it one step further and understanding that the intersectional world of others will look so different to your own, and you can't assume that we experience things the same way, and that's probably been a key takeaway, I think, for me.
One of the biggest things for me was, I guess, and we laughed about this, but I said something around feeling like a fraud. So basically thinking like, am I really qualified or the right person to be leading or creating things for these young people to do and to learn. However, we kind of spoke about it and I don't know, talked a really long time last night about how actually I am qualified. I do experience things that these young people do experience. And it's been an eye-opener for me working with these rangatahi because I've actually been able to see that in action and seeing the rangatahi work collaboratively together shows me that they've been able to see the value within each other and how that they can work together to actually get something achieved. And that was the biggest takeaway for me, was seeing that they could actually succeed and do something collaboratively, not only within the people in their own circles, but within others in their communities.
And I think reflecting on the Inspiring Speakers event, I do want to share some of the takeaways from what the young people taught us. And this event, along with the identity mural, was really the tipping point for Puawai, for Nia and I, where it all clicked into place. Even though we were part of the co-design and we said we wanted to achieve X, Y, and Z out of this program, right there when we had that event was kind of the real like eureka moment. And the key commonality through all of those young people that talked was just understanding, just be understanding. Be validating of my experiences. Our disability speakers said that it's not my abilities or lack of that make things hard, it's society and the social environment that's disabling. And I think that can be applied across each of our focus communities in Puawai. That acceptance and open-mindedness is actually everything. And again, the quote Nick, to quote Nick from Inspiring Speakers, we need to stop trying to force square pegs into circle holes. And that's a really accurate analogy for my disability, rōpū at least.
As a young Māori person in Christchurch, so I grew up in the North Island. I was born and raised in Masterton, of all places. And so I grew up in a predominantly brown community. And I'm not going to lie, looking around this room, I feel very brown right now. However, I moved to Christchurch for high school, and throughout high school, I basically experienced a lot of tokenism, I guess you would call it. You know, being asked to do the karanga at the pōwhiri because I was the only girl at school who could speak fluent te reo, or doing a karakia at a meeting before we start because that was the right thing to do, or so on and so on. So I guess what really resonated with me, and this was through the speakers event as well, was that one of our young people actually in our rainbow community mentioned something about, you know, she felt like she was still learning about her sexuality, her personal being, but at the same time had to educate others as well at the same time that she was learning about herself. And I resonated with that because I felt like, yeah, I can relate to that, because I felt like I was still learning about the tikanga and the morals and the values of what being Māori is to me, but at the same time was the person who was being asked to do these really important things that I find, you know, my grandmother that my grandmother does, or that my parents do. And so I guess to be an upstander to me would, I guess, you know, we want to encourage bicultural spaces, but I guess you need to understand at the same time what that means to you. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And my experiences, so mine's like more of a story, and then I kind of come round to it. So my story I'd like to tell is part of my story. So I'm queer, and I've been out for about a year, and coming out didn't go very well for me. And so there's this thing I feel like when you're young, like a child, and you know you're not straight, there's this idea that like, you're too young, like how do you even know? And then when you're like a young person, like rangatahi, like teenager, and you're feeling these like non-straight feelings. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking about my mum watching this video back, but anyway. When you're and you're having these non-straight feelings, and then it's kind of this phrase that like, oh, it's just a phase, or like how, like the sense of it's promiscuous. And then when you're in your mid-20s, like me, and you come out, you feel this pressure like, that's kind of late, like, have you only just found out? That's kind of late to know. And someone just last week said to me, how did you find out you were queer? And I'm like, when did you know you were straight, Neville? Which is the best response. And I was in a straight passing relationship for 6 very informative years. And during this time, I felt like this part of my identity was suppressed. It felt erased. Like if I told people, like they wouldn't believe me, which seems really stupid to think about now. And so I kept this part of me really hidden and quite guarded. And about a year ago, I was helping at an event where I tested the waters and joined a conversation about this stuff. And I said, you know, I'm queer. And some really awful things unfolded, and from some other people at that event, which felt like discrimination. And I felt really hurt and really upset and like full of regret for saying anything. And the worst part was that I needed to let my manager know what had happened because it was a work thing. And she was like a friend, and I'd never shared any of this with her. And then it went up to an advisory group where 2 members were my mentors and previous employer, and I had never actually said anything to them about it either. And I considered them my friends. And suddenly within this really short amount of time, I felt like I'd been outed to loved ones in a way that I didn't really have control over at all. And I had this awful experience of not really feeling accepted. And so around that same time, I decided to come out to my family, and had less than desirable responses from everyone except one person. And I just felt really crushed about it. And in my head, I was thinking, I'm never going to talk about this ever again. And that was 1 year ago, pretty much, like to the week. And so obviously I didn't keep to that promise, because here I am. And so my whole feelings around that have changed, and I can honestly say it all changed because of the Puawai program. And so I was talking to Nia and Rose and a few others actually during the co-design phase. There was this one meeting that we had at Ngāi Tahu, and we were all sitting there, and it was like these girls from Ngāi Tahu, Daisy, Te Ao Marama, we had our Muslim leaders, and I was like, we were talking about cultural safety and how we're going to make this program safe for everyone, and I was looking at myself like this Pākehā sitting here like, I don't have anything to contribute to this, like why am I here? And then in my head I was like, oh, but you're like, we got a rainbow rōpū and you are a rainbow, but nobody knows. And it was like this thing in my head. But then we went to the hui, and seeing the young people in our rainbow rōpū just living their truth just changed my thinking around it completely. It was I was there as tuakana of our disability group, but it was like I was learning from the young people in our program. And there was all these instances throughout Puawai where it came up. And I distinctly remember this one planning meeting at the YMCA. I think it was with Nia and Chris and maybe Te Ao Marama, and we were talking about doing window to your world at each one and who's going to do which one. And I said, oh, well, I could do the rainbow one because, you know, I'm queer. And then nobody questioned it, like nobody said anything. Nobody cared. I was like, oh, okay. Everyone was like, yeah, sweet, you do it, great. I was like, okay, that easy. And the more I interacted with Rose, who's the tuakana of the rainbow rōpū, the more I was like, okay, these are my people. And so I can just think about 5 or 6 times throughout this program where I've like dipped my toes in, and it's been such a big thing for me because it's like coming out to people that I've worked with for years, but for them it's not a big deal. And I think where I'm getting with this is to finish off that 2020 has been a shit show, you know, pandemics and things, but I can probably honestly say that I'm the happiest I've ever been. And Puawai, and seeing this discussion and love about identity and intersectionality, Puawai finally giving me the space to express myself is a huge part of that. And I think that we can all be upstanders through love activism, and just unconditional acceptance of everyone. And I think I've learnt through this upstander story is that being an upstander isn't big demonstrations and radical events. It's just small everyday interactions, really, and it's just inclusive language, and it's showing up, and it's not making a big deal, because more often than not it's a big deal in our own heads anyway.
The idea
So
behind Puawai was
share
to enable rangatahi
Chris has emphasised to let you know that this is the
may
first
not
cut.
be the typical leaders in their community.
Got the idea last year to do something with these young people, and then we did something called co-design, which is sit down with a lot of young people and ask them what they'd like. The program that they came up with was we'd like to do it with our friends, so we call it a rōpū, a small group, and we have 8 groups of like that, so it adds up to about 40 young people. They're all in this small group, but they come together as a big group once a month.
We wanted to enable them to learn about their own strengths and skills, and then from there teach them how to utilise those skills in a really positive and collaborative way.
So this is about the next generation of community leaders, and we're thinking about communities probably in a much broader sense than we ever have before, not just geographical ones, but communities of interest and any community that a person sort of feels a sense of belonging to.
We all go to our different schools and we're all part of our different friend groups. We kind of don't really meet people who aren't like us. It's just been really cool meeting people from different walks of life.
The whole program is sort of based on a kaupapa Māori foundation, but within that there's lots of cultures and identities that we're exploring.
We thought it was really important because these groups are minorities within our communities.
Well, 2 of those groups are young Māori, mainly from Ōtautahi, and so for them it's around the same thing, growing their potential and connecting with their identity. But we've also got some Pacific groups, we've got some groups from the rainbow community, some groups from the Muslim community, and some groups from the disability community. And some of them are a mixture of all those things, as you can imagine.
When we first came, we were really surprised. It was really, really cool to see the different rōpū involved in this kaupapa.
I've been Muslim my whole life. I heard that there was this program and I was really excited to just come on in. Something more like community oriented so that I can feel more like I belong in like Christchurch as a whole.
I was born in the beautiful island of Mangere, South Auckland, but my parents whakapapa, they're Samoan Chinese. So I'm just going to share one short piece that tells you a little bit about what it was like for me growing up in South Auckland. I never knew why my dad used to wait till we finished eating, or why he'd only pour my glass of milk only half full, or why my high school mates say they don't even know.
makes anyone a leader who celebrates their culture, because I know a lot of people are ashamed to speak up about their culture, and some people I guess they just feel alone because no one really showcases that side of them that much these days. So yeah, I think it's just awesome for anyone to really uplift their culture in any way. So.
First got involved was I go to Ōtautahi, which is an LGBTQ+ youth group in the city, and one of the facilitators was invited by Puawai to invite kids to join her ropu, the rainbow ropu. I'm big into intersectionality, and I think that's part of what makes Puawai really special, is that instead of just focusing on the group that we're a part of, we get to learn about and focus on other groups of people and how our experiences are the same and how they're different.
To me, I think Puawai is more just about finding yourself and finding what strengths suit you best. So, you know, when we finish school and then we go out to the real world, that we're equipped with the right assets to face reality, I guess.
What I would really like to see is Puawai 2 really building on the foundations of what we've built here, and if young people that have really got a lot out of Puawai would like to continue, for them to stay on and maybe continue that journey with us and step up into more of a leadership role in planning the program in the future for new young people coming in around discovering and understanding not just their identity but the identity of others.
I was just going to leave it there, but just wanted to add that Puawai's not finished yet. We have our next hui on the 25th of August, and the window to the world focus is our Muslim ropu is leading that. And then after that, we're going to have a big celebration, and that's going to be awesome. So thank you.
Good, everyone.
Thank you.